So for those of you who were not here last week, my name is Patrick Looby. That's L-O-O-B-Y. We already went over the fact that it's an unfortunate name. It rhymes with a lot of stuff. But you can just call me Pat or Mr. Looby or something, Mr. Pat, something like that. And we're talking for the first couple of these classes on a topic called natural theology. And natural theology is where we don't use the Bible or a catechism to know things about God or about faith, because we're kind of in a battle here with the secular world. There's a lot of attacks on the faith, and we're talking with a lot of people, and we're coming across a lot of people that don't share our belief in the Bible or the catechism. And so we're asking the question, how do we approach these people? How can we talk to these people about the faith, defend our faith, using stuff that we do agree with them on, reason, science, and those types of topics. So that's what we've been going over. Last week we talked about subjective and objective truth. Who here can tell me the difference between subjective and objective reality? 2 hands. Really? That's it? Is
subjective is opinion and
okay.
Objective is fact.
So subjective thinking is opinion-based, it's perspective-based, whereas objective things are things that are factual, things that can be either right or wrong. And it's important to know the difference between these two, because our modern world tries to put everything in the subjective category, which means it's all just opinion. All right, so you believe in God, well, God exists for you, but he doesn't exist for me. Or abortion is okay for me, but it's not okay for you, and that's okay. You can't tell me any different because it's just my opinion. The problem with that is those are not opinionated categories of thought. God either exists or he doesn't. It's not a matter of opinion. I can't have an opinion about the existence of Father Fimian. He's either our parochial vicar or he's not. It's not something that's up for debate. Now, someone in California may not know that Father Fimian exists, but not knowing that he exists is not the same thing as him not existing. So the question about whether God exists or not is an objective question. It has a right or wrong answer. So how can we talk about that? The same thing is true with morality. Either abortion is something that humans ought to do, or it's something that humans ought not to do. It can't be the case that it's okay for some and not okay for others. That's not how morality works. It's part of objective reality. There's a right or wrong answer. So how do we approach people to be able to open them up to the idea of these questions? And last week we talked about the cosmological proof for the existence of God, or the cosmological argument for God's existence. Who here thinks they can kind of give me a summary of the cosmological argument for God's existence? No one. So disappointed. I have candy. Mr. McCabe. Yes.
But from all my years ago with you as my religion teacher, there's something on the one say, there is stuff here, and stuff doesn't come from nothing. So something must be created.
That's a good basic summary. Does anyone want to elaborate on that? Last time, thank you, you get a piece of candy, my friend. Thank you. I told you that for candy. So we talked last time. The argument went like this: everything that begins to exist has a cause. Nothing just pops into existence uncaused. Number 2, the universe began to exist. So if everything that begins to exist has a cause, and the universe began to exist, then the universe needs a cause. And then we ask the question, well, what sort of cause could the universe have? Well, it can't be anything physical, because the universe is everything that's physical, and it doesn't exist yet. So whatever caused the universe has to be immaterial, and it can't be in time, because there's no time yet without the universe. So whatever caused the universe to exist has to be an immaterial, timeless, or eternal cause. I don't know about you, but the only candidates I know for something like that would be what we call God. Now, we've looked at possible objections to this argument. Maybe the universe never began to exist. Maybe the universe has always been here. And we looked at the scientific evidence against that and the philosophical evidence against that. First of all, it makes no sense to have a beginningless universe. Because how would we get to the present moment if the past was infinite? In order to arrive to this present moment from the past, we would have to go through an infinite amount of time. And you can't complete an infinite amount of time. So just philosophically, it doesn't make sense that the universe has always existed. But number 2, even modern science now has rejected the infinite past. All modern scientific cosmological models show the beginning of the universe. So if the universe began to exist from nothing, then whatever caused it to exist cannot be anything material or temporal. And that sounds an awful lot like what we call God. But that's not the only way we can show God's existence. And so today we're going to look at three other ones. The first one we're going to look at, that was cosmological. Now we're going to look at a teleological argument. Now, cosmology is the study of first causes. Remember, that argument is, I have a chair, therefore I know that there is, or at least was at some time, a chair maker. Because chairs just don't pop into existence. So by the mere existence of something, I know that there must have been a cause prior to that thing. And that's how we get the idea that the universe needed a cause. But I can also tell something else about this cause by what the thing is. Teleology is the study of final causes, or design or purpose. When a thing shows design or purpose, we know that whatever caused it to be has to be a personal cause. See, there's two different types of causes. There's impersonal causes, such as temperature causing water to freeze. Water doesn't will the water to freeze. It doesn't choose to freeze the water. Just by the mere existence of the temperature being 32 degrees Fahrenheit or below, water freezes. And so that's just an impersonal cause. But then there's personal causes that can exist, and then they choose to create something. And usually we see design or purpose in this. For instance, if I was flying over a deserted island and I saw help carved out in the sand on the beach, I wouldn't think to myself, look at that, it's amazing that the waves crashed up on the shore and, just coincidentally carved out what looks like the word help on the beach. That wouldn't be my first thought. What would be my first thought? Right, that there's an intellect down on that island. Because when we see design, when we see something so well designed or purposeful, we know that there must have been an intellectual design or intellectual cause behind that. So the question is, does the universe show something that would be more design or not? If I was walking through the woods and I looked in the bushes and I saw a perfectly working stopwatch, I could wind it up and it kept great time, I wouldn't think to myself, oh, look at this, over billions of years, all the elements of nature just kind of collide together and form this perfectly working stopwatch. No, I would think that someone dropped it, that there was an intellect there behind it. Well, it's just amazing because in modern science, we have what has basically been shown to be great design in the universe. In fact, it's one of the most exciting parts of modern science. We see a lot of people who go into this field of teleology, of cosmology and science, as atheists or agnostics, and then coming out as theists. They may not be Christians by the end of it, but they know that there's something behind the universe because it's just too well put together. In fact, there's modern theories that have put together the probability of having the right kind of planet around the right kind of sun, the right distance away, with the right kind of atmosphere, with the right kind of inner core, with the right kind of huge planets behind us to protect us from debris. All these things happening by chance would be like a 1 with 100 zeros after it. All right? I don't know if you can imagine that. 10 to the, what? 10 to the 10. What would you 100? 10 times 10 to the 10 with 1 with 100 zeros after it. So by scientific organization. So this is, now I want you to understand the probability of this though. This is mind-numbing numbers. I want you to understand this. Because this is kind of an amazing thing. Think about the lottery. Like, let's say you had a 1 in 18 million chance to win the lottery. And you won it 1 week. Now, if you won it once, we would say, no big deal, someone has to win it. But if you win it again the next week, and then again the next week, all of a sudden, people are going to say, this is not coincidence. This is not just a random thing. Someone's cheating. We would immediately see design in that type of probability because it's so improbable that we call it impossible without the help of some sort of intellect behind it. Now, the chances of you winning the lottery 3 times in a row, however small, is nowhere near this number. And that's the amazing thing. We can look at someone winning the lottery 3 times in a row and know that someone cheated. And yet we're told that we have to accept that something so far improbable as having everything exactly the way it needs to be in the universe, we're supposed to accept random chance as the explanation for that. It doesn't work out. So that's a teleological argument for the existence of God, that when we see design, we know there must be a designer. Number 2, in the universe we see great design. And therefore, number 3, the universe must have had an intellectual designer. The next one I want to go over is a powerful one. It's a little bit more personal. It's the one that actually helped convert C.S. Lewis. Does anyone know who C.S. Lewis is? Yes, raise your hand if you know C.S. Lewis. All right, C.S. Lewis, kind of a self-proclaimed atheist in the beginning of his life, never really bothered with religion, but he had some pretty religious friends. He was a fiction writer, fantasy writer. J.R.R. Tolkien, devout Catholic, was one of his friends. And through conversations and through writing fantasy together, he came to be a very devout Christian himself and wrote a lot on Christianity. And he admits that the following argument for God's existence is the one that really dogged him all of his years as an atheist and really kind of, worked on his rationale a little bit. And it's the argument from desire. And it's kind of it's an interesting one because it's kind of personal. But I think once we go over the argument, you'll see that it is kind of a tough one to answer. And it kind of goes like this. Every innate desire has a corresponding reality that satisfies that desire. Sort of my writing. Let me break that down for a second. Every innate desire. What's an innate desire? Well, we have two different kinds of desires. We have innate or natural desires, and we have artificial desires. An innate or natural desire is one that all human beings have. It doesn't matter where you live or when you live, whether it's today in America or 3,000 years ago in the Middle East. It doesn't matter. Just by the mere fact that you're a human being, you have this desire, such as food. We're born desiring food, and it just so happens that on this planet there is food that can satisfy that desire for a human being. Or drink, society, these types of things humans desire, and they're always for real things. Now we can have artificial desires, but those we'd have to learn about. Like I could have the desire to have a Ferrari, but I would need to know what a Ferrari is first. It's not a natural desire. I learn about Ferraris and then I want one. But someone 3,000 years ago would never have that desire because they wouldn't know what one is. But I still share something with all humans of these natural desires. So every natural desire is for something real. That's the first premise. Premise number two is this. Every human being, everyone, has a desire for perfect happiness. Unending happiness. Now this is the tricky premise, because you have to get the person to admit this. But I've been working with people for a long time, and I've never known anyone who didn't know what it was like to sit on the beach. You're sitting there, you're on vacation, there's not a care in the world, there's no homework, there's no nothing. The waves are perfect, the sun's perfect, the birds are chirping, whatever, and you just sit there, you're just like, I just wish I could freeze this moment forever. I don't want to go back to life where there's sickness and people are dying and there's homework and there's stress, and I just wish I could just freeze this moment. Everyone knows what that's like, and yet we can't get it in this life. So this is tricky. It's either either nature has played a trick for us. Imagine if we were born desiring food, but we had no stomachs. Or there was no food that could feed us. Everything was poison. What a cruel trick of nature that is. We're not born desiring things that don't exist. We're born desiring things that really exist. So either this is a cruel trick of nature to create us in a way desiring something that is completely unattainable, or it really does exist. It's just not in this world. No matter what we try to put in this bottomless pit of desire that we have, we're all looking for. We spend our entire lives looking for the satisfaction of this perfect desire, that scene that we can just freeze and let the credits roll and they live happily ever after. We all want that. That's what orders our entire lives. That's why we do what we do. We're looking for that thing that can fill that. And yet we know it's not here. So it's either the only natural desire that does not have a corresponding reality, or the reality does indeed exist. It's just not here. That we were literally made for a different world. Now this one requires some thought and personal reflection. Like I said, it's the one that really put C.S. Lewis over the edge. He couldn't explain as an atheist why he had this desire for something that in his worldview shouldn't exist. Why was he desiring something like heaven if he knew heaven didn't exist? And it really bothered him. And eventually he gave in. He said, you know what? It must exist. Because all my desires are for something. Questions about that one? What do you think about that one? Mr. Hellman, what do you think about that? Comments, anybody? We're talking about. No one? Just get some bonfires for me. All right, we're going to go on to one more here. And then we're going to do the skeptics argument.
Actually, can you explain more about what it was that he did desire? And, you know,
He just knew he wanted something that is impossible in his life. And he couldn't explain why would he desire something that was a fairy tale. And every human that he talked to desired the same thing. All humans desire this fairy tale. And so what he came to realize is it's not a fairy tale.
what is the fairy tale? To live forever?
Perfect happiness. That's why we live our lives. We're all looking for that thing. I mean, that, you know, people chase after money and sex and drugs and all this stuff to fill this void. And we know if you've read the literature, it doesn't work. You're always left wanting for more. And so how do you explain that humans are born desiring something to fill this bottomless pit of a hole, and it's nothing in this world can do it. So there must be something more to this thing. That's the only way to explain that we all have that natural desire to look for something. All right, we're going to do one more, and then we're going to go to the skeptics argument. The one I want to do right now is called the moral argument. And this one is pretty impressive as well. I've actually known people that have been converted by this. I had a girl who took my ethics class in Texas. It was a senior level bioethics course. And the first day of class, she raised her hand and she said, Mr. Looby, I just want to let you know, this was a Catholic school, all-girls school in Texas. And she said, Mr. Looby, I just want to let you know, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God, but I took your course because I heard that you could debate and argue in here, now I can debate here. Debate. Now this course was not a theology course per se. We weren't going to study revealed theology. It was an ethics course. We were going to study the moral law. So there was nothing overt in my teaching towards her, but by the end of this course, she asked me to be her confirmation sponsor. She had basically turned around her whole thinking, and it was because of this argument right here. In fact, there's a pretty famous atheistic blogger who was just on CNN announcing that she had converted to Catholicism after years of blogging as an atheist, again, because of the moral argument. So what is the moral argument? The moral argument goes like this. Number one, if objective moral values exist, then God must exist. So let's unpack that one here. Objective moral values, not subjective moral values. We all know the subjective moral value is, it's wrong for you, but it's okay for me. Now that's kind of hard to swallow, but if objective moral values exist, if there are some things that are really wrong or really right, regardless of what you think about them, then there must be an explanation for that. If there is a true moral law that governs humanity, then there has to be a moral lawgiver. If you get rid of the judge, then what is morality? If there's no ultimate judge of my actions, then who's to say what's really right or wrong or what I can really do? But if you really believe in objective moral values, and again, I've never known someone that didn't. I've known people that tried to say that they did, but once you talk to them about stuff, you realize that they really believe in objective moral values on some things. There are some things that are really wrong, like the torture and murder of an innocent child. Who wouldn't say that that's really wrong, really an evil act? But if there really are objective moral values that apply to everyone, regardless of where they live or when they live, then God must exist. So premise number 2 is just a statement. Objective moral values do exist. We may disagree on them sometimes. We may not agree that this action is really wrong, or we may debate abortion, whatever, but there are some things you can usually get people to admit are really wrong. So the only way to wiggle out of this argument, so if objective moral values exist, then God must exist. While objective moral values do exist, number 3, therefore God exists. The only way to get out of this is to try to claim that there are no objective moral values. Now, there have been some philosophers who have tried to do this. Nietzsche is a good example. Anyone ever read or heard of Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche? God is dead, right. I actually like Friedrich Nietzsche because I think he's the only honest atheist. All right, he was very clear about the fact that if you get rid of God, you get rid of all meaning. You get rid of all moral values, all meaning in anything. And I think he's right. I think he's the only atheist that has really been honest about the fact that unless God exists, then you cannot have any meaning at all in the universe. Now, there have been some atheistic philosophers who have tried to develop an ethics that could be objective without God, and they all fail. Because if you take out God, then there really isn't anything really wrong with torture or murder or rape. These things may be socially unacceptable, but you can't call them evil. Because without a God, nothing can be evil or nothing can be good. It's actually a pretty scary universe that kind of becomes available to us if we try to take God out of the picture. The only way to have an objective morality, one where there are really things that are right and wrong, is if God indeed exists. And so again, I have a hard time, I've never met someone that could actually try to deny premise 2 and make it work. At the end, we all know that deep down, there are some things that are really wrong and really right. And if that's the case, then you must accept the fact that the only way that that can be possible is if there is a moral lawgiver. Any questions about that one? Okay. Now, these arguments are not why we believe in God. I don't want you to get the wrong picture. These arguments that we've gone over are to do a couple different things. One, to give you an even playing field when you're talking about people that don't share our faith and are questioning you or even attacking you for your faith. Number 2, they are for those times in your life when you are being attacked with doubt. My friends, I gotta tell you, life can be hard and the enemy is always working against you. And you will go through what the saints call the dark nights. Those dark nights are when God feels absent from you, far away from you, and Satan is working on you. And he's attacking your faith. And so you may not feel God, you may not feel his presence, you may not feel close to him, but hopefully these arguments, these lines of reasoning will come in the back of your mind, and even though you're not feeling close to God, you still know that he's there. Because there's no way to explain the existence of the universe without him. And so sometimes this can be your last line of defense against attacks on your faith. But I'll give you one last one. It's not an argument that actually proves the existence of God. This is the skeptic's argument. This is the one where you've tried the cosmological, you've tried the teleological, and you're still not making any headway with your friend. All right? And so this is actually developed by Pascal. Good guy. All right? He was a Catholic, brilliant guy, mathematician, but he wasn't a big fan of the arguments for God's existence. He didn't think they proved enough. Big deal, you prove that God exists. What does that mean? All right? That's not enough. He didn't think it was enough. He thought you could be a little more compelling to show that you actually should try to develop a relationship with this God, even if you don't know that he exists. And it kind of goes like this. If I was to hand you a lottery ticket, and I said it was free, here's a free lottery ticket, okay? If you take this lottery ticket, okay, you will either win $1 million or nothing will happen to you. And I'm giving it to you free. Would you take that lottery ticket? Yes. Now, she doesn't know if she's going to win yet, but she'd be pretty foolish not to take that ticket, right? She's either going to win $1 million or nothing's going to happen, all right? Now, if I'm going to give you a free lottery ticket, you take this ticket. If you win, nothing will happen. If you lose, I'm going to take everything that you own. Would you take that ticket? No. All of a sudden, that's a dumb ticket, right? You're like, I don't want that ticket. There's a big difference between this ticket and that ticket. And Pascal said it's the same thing with believing in God's existence if you're not sure. If you're a skeptic, if you're dealing with someone who's not sure still, they're agnostic. All right, so, well, Pascal said there's only two possibilities. Either God exists or God does not exist. Those are the only two possible outcomes, right? So you're not sure. You're not sure which ticket to buy. There's only two possible tickets. There's the ticket that says, you know what? I'm going to get my butt out of bed on Sunday mornings, and I'm going to believe. I'm going to live as a believer. I'm going to go with the fact that God exists. I'm going to buy that ticket. I'm going to throw in with God, and that's the ticket I'm going to buy. Or I'm not going to believe. I'm going to do as I please. I'm going to sleep in on Sundays, and since I don't know that I have no reason to even attempt it, I'm not going to believe. Those are the only two tickets you can buy. You say, well, Mr. Looby, wait. What about the maybe tickets? What if I have one foot on both sides here? Yeah, I straddle for a while. Why can't agnosticism work in the end? What prevents agnosticism from being a real choice? Anyone know? Why does maybe not work? Yes? Well, why eventually does agnosticism fail? Agnosticism becomes purchasing one of these tickets. It's because of death. You can only say maybe until the end of your life, and then your maybe becomes a no. If Romeo proposes to Juliet every day, and Juliet keeps saying maybe, and then they die, did they ever get married? No. Agnosticism will be forced to choose no upon your death. So these are the only two tickets. You either have to choose to believe, or you choose not to believe, or you try to play the maybe ticket, but once you die, that's going to end up, you're going to be defaulted to the I don't believe ticket. And so Pascal says this is an easy bet. He called it his wager. What are the two possible outcomes? If you choose this ticket, what are the possible outcomes? Well, if you choose to believe, and God ends up existing, ding, 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 this is the big prize. That's the best combination. All right? You lived as a believer, you threw in, you did your best, God ends up existing, that's awesome. What happens if you choose to believe and God does not exist? Nothing. Right. You're just fertilized. No problem. Okay? This is what Pascal said. Let's look at the other ticket though. What if you don't believe? What if you say, you know what, I'm not sure, these religious people, I don't know, you know what, I'm just going to do my own thing. So you choose not to believe and God ends up existing. All right, this is the bad combination, all right? This is not a good outcome. Well, what happens if you choose not to believe and God doesn't exist? Nothing. Right. Pascal says if you are a skeptic or you're someone struggling with faith, you are still a fool if you don't actually live as a believer. If you don't, everyone struggles with doubt. Everyone goes through that. But there's no winning over this ticket. This second ticket, the only choices are losing everything or nothing at all. The only choice you have at anything in this life is actually to do your best at trying to foster faith. So Pascal said it really comes down to that sort of a wager. Any questions about that? Real quickly, I'm trying to do this quickly. Yes? You just set me up. You just teed me up and listen, I'll wait for the last step, and then we're done. This is awesome. There are tens of thousands of different religions in this world. So great, Mr. Looby. You've convinced me that there's some higher power, but if I don't choose the right religion, I'm going to go to hell anyway. And there's thousands and thousands of religions and thousands of gods and thousands of this. And how am I supposed to choose? It almost seems like a needle in a haystack problem. In fact, I've seen debates with atheists before, and they'll bring this point up. Okay, big deal, Pascal's wager, but which God? Which religion? And you know what? I don't think that this is a very important question at all. I don't think it's a needle in a haystack problem. I think it's like an elephant in the haystack problem. Because if we really think about what a religion would look like that came from God versus a religion that was created by men, right? Because those are the only two options. Either we have created a false religion, or one of the religions has to be the one that God has given humanity, to get to himself, and all the rest of them are religions that man builds up to try to get to God on his own power. Well, I think that we can reasonably think of three criteria or three attributes of the real religion if God